Hello, welcome to Inside the Writers' Room for Rami. I'm Roxy. I'm one of the festival directors of the Lower East Side Film Festival, and today I'm really excited for this conversation. This is a show that I really love, and it's really captures New York City in a really fun and exciting way, in an interesting way that not a lot of people see. And I'm really excited to welcome Rowaida here to moderate this conversation from the Huffington Post. And without further ado, I kind of just want to kick it off to you guys to start this conversation, and also thank you again for joining. I know the world is a very crazy place right now, so I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have this conversation and hopefully have some fun. I know it's a comedy, so I'm excited to hear from some comedy writers during this time. So anyway, without further ado, I'll kick it off to you, and I'll go ahead and just turn off my video. Take it away.
Awesome, great. Well, welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum. It's always nice to be able to say the traditional salams. I feel like nowadays we're picking and choosing when and you cannot and can say it. So super excited that we can get that off the bat. I have a bunch of questions for everyone. Like I said, my name is Rowaida. I'm a reporter at HuffPost, where I cover Islamophobia and social justice issues within the Muslim American communities. Really refreshing to be talking about comedy today and maybe not talking about hate crimes or institutional racism. So this is going to be really refreshing and fun on my end. To kind of get us started, I figured we'd do like a quick round the room, just so everyone can just introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. I'm Rami, and this show is initially based on a lot of my work, my stand-up, and then with the help of the people you see here and some other great ones, we've been able to build a show that is based on a family that's an Arab Muslim family in New Jersey, and really a story that I think tracks this main character of Rami and his faith journey, in him trying to be his higher self and him kind of dealing with that gap between who he wants to be and who he actually is. And so it's been really fun to get to have this group by my side as we figure out the best way to do that, and so excited for you to meet all of them.
Amazing, thank you. Who wants to go next?
My name is Amir Sulaiman. I'm a writer on the show, an associate producer. I'm otherwise a poet. And obviously I'm Black, so that worked out well for this season. It was a great experience for me and a new experience for me. And as other people have said about this room, including Mahershala talking about the room and the cast, that it was just even just the creation of it was such a great experience. And so, now the work that we've done to go out into the world and see how other people are engaging it and benefiting from it, or it's sparking conversations like we're having today, or even more importantly, questions. That's the most exciting thing about the process that we get to indulge in now. So this conversations like this, I've been looking forward to see how people are engaging, what we've put out into the world. Yeah.
Amazing, and thanks for reminding us that you're Black. I think really great. And it's definitely going to be a topic, I think, later that we're really going to go into. Like you said, super relevant. Cool.
I'm Adel Kamal. I'm Egyptian and Muslim, and I worked on this season of Rami as a writer and associate producer. I also worked on the first season as a PA, both on set and in the writer's room. Like Amir said, I'm really excited to kind of, recap the season now that we kind of know how other people have engaged with it, and kind of recapping it with the people that, we made it together. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, I'm Thulin. I was one of the writers and supervising producer. And it was such a great writing experience, and I'm so excited to be here today and to see everybody. Well, almost everybody, but it was, I miss you guys so much. It was like seriously an amazing experience to write this, and it's like so exciting to put it out into the world and see how people respond to it.
My name is Maytha Alhassen. I think Rami on Vanity Fair or in an interview said I read a lot of books and stuff, and that's some of my role on this show. I'm a professor by day, or I don't know how we split up our days anymore. And I have a long history doing social justice work in and around abolition, what was formerly called prison abolition, and then also doing anti-racism work, especially in the Muslim and Arab community. So that's been a decades-long process. And I met Rami about a decade ago, and I guess I was kind of like a comedy dramaturg for Rami around stand-up. We talk about his sets, and I came on board as a creative advisor in the first season, and season 2, I became a writer in the room.
Incredible. This is so awesome. Everyone has such unique and different backgrounds, and I think that's really going to contribute to the richness of the conversation. And I think there's so many themes that I want to touch upon, especially in season 2. So many of it is so relevant today, but also I think we saw a huge progression from season 1 to season 2. But let's kind of take it back and take it slow. I think let's forget the Arabness for a quick minute. Let's forget the Muslimness for a quick minute. But I think if we're thinking really big picture here, we see from the very top that Rami's character is really struggling, but also putting in a super deliberate effort to reconcile being a person of faith, right? His Muslim faith and his Muslim identity, and making that intent and trying to take the tangible actions to meet, I think, this, perfect vision that he has for himself. But let's be real, the US is in a way and not really a religious country, or let alone a Muslim in terms of the Muslim spirituality. Film and industry and music and that entire realm tends to be, I think, tends to stray away from religion, generally speaking. I mean, in journalism, people tend to not talk about religion. Religion is seen as taboo and topic. So why was it so important for you guys to tackle faith and religion and spirituality from the top, from the very beginning? And were you hesitant at all when pitching it, when talking about, I guess, like a religious show?
Yeah. Well, it all kind of started with the desire, and then that desire turned into a joke. And then the joke made it really clear to me that we would be able to pull off the show. The desire was wanting to see the relationship that someone has with God portrayed in a real light, not what we'd seen, which has been very fantastical, whether it be actual angels in heaven and gates, or kind of meeting religious people who are, like the priest who does cocaine, and just kind of these massive hypocrisies. And in comedy, really, religion's a punchline, like if you were like, yeah, then I took her to church, it's like a joke, and so I really had this desire to show that relationship in the way that I thought about it, which is, it's not this absolute vision of piety, or this absolute vision of walking away, and I wanted to see what it felt like on screen, and just have that feeling of, man, I do something and I feel guilty, or man, I do something and I know how I want to do it better, and just represent that struggle again from who you want to be and where you actually are. And so I was trying to figure out how to write a joke about that, and it was kind of like, it was something I said to one of our producers, Gerard. We were walking around, and I was like, man, how do we make a show that can tap into this? And I was like, well, I want to try and write about it on stage. And then one Ramadan, I was doing stand-up in a bar, and I was just like kind of laughing at the dichotomy of doing stand-up in a bar and during Ramadan, and I said that I'm fasting because I believe in God, like God, not yoga. And I remember saying that joke, and there was like a laugh and there was a pop, but then there was also this thing where it felt, everyone was like, really? And there was this like idea of like, whoa, this, like, as if what I was saying was edgy. And it was weird because the guy before me had this whole bit about being on an acid trip and putting people in the trunk of his car, and everyone was laughing like nothing was going wrong. And then I kind of just say I believe in God, and I was like, oh, this is punk rock. Like, something about this is like, it has this thing where people are like, I can't believe you're saying this thing. And I think getting into that pocket, even finding it with that one joke, it kind of changed the way I was writing a lot of my material, because I realized I could talk about what was actually going on with me. And then that turned into, over many steps, into our show pitch and into kind of presenting this vision to the world.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about that is I think in a lot of also your interviews and the talks that you've given, you always try to make the distinction of, I'm not looking at religion in terms of the theology. I'm not here to debate theology or the institution. And I can really relate to that in my work. I'm not quite a religion reporter. I don't talk about the theory of God, does he exist, does he not exist, but I'm focusing a lot more on the people and their experiences. And it seems like you are doing something very similar, right? And I think a lot of your critics who want to say, well, Islam this and Islam that, I think you come back and you say, well, I'm talking about the human, right? And we see that, and not just in Rami's character, but everybody else's character, that things are pretty messy, right? And there are these other humanistic concepts that maybe we dislike, like short-term gratification, like selfishness. But did you feel comfortable with that messiness? Did you intentionally wanted to make it messy? And did you expect some of the pushback that you've gotten from, say, maybe more conservative folks?
Pushback, very expected. The comfort level for me, I think there's a lot of anxiety, and I think everyone who's in the room can speak to it too. I think we're always like, ooh, man, are we really going to do that? And then we're like, yeah, we got to do it. You know, I think for me on a personal level, especially in the first season, cracking open certain things, I really care about the community, and I do care about my faith, and I do care about how my culture looks. And so there was this instinct initially to want to protect it, but then, you know, the comedian in me, the writer in me, also being surrounded by, I think when we were writing the pilot, me and Ari and Ryan, who aren't with us today, but they, you know, we were all like really, they were helping push me to things that I think I was like a little bit uncomfortable with. And then once I kind of saw what that did, not just to the character, but to me, you know, as we kind of keep writing and keep making it, I think we get really excited when there's this pocket of nervousness that kind of usually feels like that's probably where we should write from. And because if we write from that, hopefully too, because we're nervous, again, we're going to respect how we approach that and how we get that out.
I'm glad you brought up this comfort, and Maytha, maybe this is something that you can touch upon. So we all know, like Muslim one-on-one, we probably took this in some sort of poli-sci class or an Oriental class, right? We all pay tributes to our Edward Saids and Jack Shaheens, that the overall perception of Muslims in media, whether we're talking about, you know, creative or news, is overwhelmingly negative. And not negative in the sense where it's a, you know, bad portrayal versus a good portrayal, but it's statistically inaccurate. It's, you know, gross misrepresentation. It's always violent, etc. And so we know that this is a foundation that we're working with, that you guys are working with. And so, but we see that the show, even though it touches upon it, it also almost kind of leans into some of the stereotypes, right? So we have Uncle Nassim's character, we have the plot line with the cousin and Rami. How does one find a creative balance between what we know historically was the backdrop of representation, and still feel bold enough, but cautious enough, right? Like playing that line to kind of lean into some of these things where a lot of people are just like, ooh, like, do we really need to go there?
Thank you for that question. You're referring to a report that I wrote a couple years ago that led me on a journey to look at 100 years of representing Muslims on TV and film. We usually think of 9/11 as the moment we start to see Muslims on screen, but that's not the case. But there is some enduring stereotypes or tropes, as we call them, tropes and traps. And those are tied to Orientalism. They're tied to a long history of anti-Blackness, erasing Black Muslims from the story, unless Black filmmakers who are close to the story of Muslims in America would produce those films, like Spike Lee, like Julie Dash, like the Hughes brothers. They all had Muslim characters in their films pre 9/11, But when it came to non-Black Muslims, what we did see were really one-dimensional stereotypes that were some of the worst we could imagine. The terrorist, the sheikh with the harem, and heavily influenced clearly by Orientalism. And then when we go in a post 9/11 moment, I think what you're talking about is this good Muslim, bad Muslim binary, where you can only be a super good Muslim. And you see a lot of that internalized pushback to Rami because some people still want us to be the good Muslim. And they don't understand that that's a trap too for us to be in, because the way it's defined is from the white non-Muslim gaze. Like, the reason you're a good Muslim is if you are a supporter of the administration, supporter of the state, if you are radically outspoken against the terrorists, the this, the that. So you have a really small box you live in, and the bad Muslim only gets to be the terrorist. And so even if you have characters like Uncle Nassim, and even if you have characters like in this season, we have an Emirati royal who feels like he's over the top, but those things exist in a little bit more complexity of, we get to see why Uncle Nassim is racist and xenophobic and why he is homophobic. All those things have a layer of intricacies of internal struggle that all those other good Muslim, bad Muslim binary characters do not. So I hope that people can see the genius of being able to explore the spectrum of these characters, interrogating the faults and flaws that they deal with, while also thinking about how they live in the US and how they practice a faith tradition that for a lot of us in this room is still a big part of our lives.
Do we think there is a right way, a formula out there of how do you give nuance and how do you give life and how do you give richness to characters, but still not falling into these tropes or still not leaning into some of these stereotypes? Do you guys come up with one post season one?
Well, the right way is definitively kind of the opposite of what our job is. Our job's not really to be right. It's to give our creative take on something. And I think there are certain lines we don't cross. You know, I think, like, from where I stand, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody or make fun of anybody. I think all of our characters who are presented are thoughtful, whether it be the, you know, any of the tropes that Maytha just mentioned, or, you know, any direction we go in. It's really about connecting, meeting someone at a private place that they're in, and therefore humanizing them. So yeah, it's not really about it being right so much as it is, yeah, you don't want to feel like you're denigrating, disrespecting, doing any of those things to any of these characters or any of these people that we're showing, because obviously we're already in a little bit of like a tough bind as it is with how we're represented. But we don't shy away from any of those tropes, mostly because we already know they're out there, and so why wouldn't we have our take on them? Why wouldn't it be something that we can make our own and make funny? Why can't we own that uncle character? Because everyone who watches that has that uncle character. Jewish people are like, well, I have an uncle like that who says that about Muslims. White people are like, I have an uncle like that who says that stuff about Black people. You know, so there's nothing about this that feels like it's only us, and that's because we give it a chance. Even the cousin storyline, there's most people who watch that storyline are like, well, if that was my cousin, I would be in the same situation. And so it's important to bring empathy to these things.
Except for I think he made it clear that not except for him, right?
Exploring the flaws of our community in this show is like one of my favorite things to do. It's like more humanizing to me than like if we were to do these characters that are like, you know, holier than thou, or saying that Islam is all good and no bad. Like, getting a chance to really talk about the things that, you know, are our pitfalls and the ways in which we can improve, and the things that we really need to look ourselves in the mirror and kind of address. That's one of my favorite things about, you know, working on this job, working on this show in general, is that we kind of embrace that mentality, and we kind of, you know, open up discussions in our own communities that hopefully will help further improve our, you know, the people that we know and the communities that we spend a lot of time in.
Yeah. I think yeah, a lot of the things that you're saying, I really like this concept of ownership. You know, these are like the words that are kind of like triggering in the back of my head that you're speaking, and this idea of, well, if we don't do it, then who will? And then the person who does do it, then will it become problematic? And I think I've seen this in a lot of my work in journalism, where oftentimes I think we have gotten so frustrated with the coverage of Muslims and Muslim Americans is because oftentimes the people writing the bylines, not that they're malicious by any way, but don't understand the intricacies, I think, of the community, and therefore are not able to capture those nuances in a holistic level. And I think I see some of those parallels in a lot of the different storylines. And one that I think we absolutely have to talk about, and I don't want to delay any further, is talking about Frank in the Future and really discussing, without going into too many spoilers, but the topic of anti-Blackness, I think, in the Arab and South Asian and the Muslim communities. And something that is extraordinarily relevant with what's happening today in the anti-racism protests that we're having today. We've also seen in our community a conversation about how do we have these conversations at home, right? How are Arabs and South Asians and non-Black Muslims having these conversations? And I think it's incredibly telling when we speak to people in the Black Muslim community, just being at this intersection, right, of being Muslim and being Black. I have to say that scene made me hungry for more. And I don't know if it was because so much is happening now. And so I think we're all really heightened and really paying attention to that conversation. But I feel like I could have had a lot more, and not just from Uncle Nassim, I think talking about the really uncomfortable issue that I think a lot of us don't want to talk about, especially when you're, talking about marginalized communities. Addressing your own faults, can be tricky. And most people just want to say, we need to brush this aside and focus on the bigger problem, right? Whether it's white supremacy or the government or the policies. But then again, we still need to have those conversations. So walk me through that scene. Are there plans to kind of open this up a bit more?
It's definitely something that we're aware of with our characters, right? And I think, like, as a show, usually anytime we're really pressing up on an issue, we're kind of seeing where it's going to take our characters and what kind of real estate it's naturally going to give. And it's something that it felt like the right dose of it for where we were in that scene. And I think as we get to know these characters moving forward, we definitely have plans to be closer with Sheikh Ali and Zainab moving forward. I think those things are going to naturally unfold, and are going to become clearer to them as they come up organically. So I think we're really always cognizant about wanting these things to come up organically, and really, even with our first season, we meet some characters, and then the second season we're able to give them more. And I think that's the hope here too, which is we just introduced 2 new characters while also continuing to round out our core cast that we had from season 1, and so who are all just really captivating to me. And so it's always a fine balance, but the hope is that we get to do that more moving into season 3. But it's something we've talked about a lot, and I think Amir can speak to as well. Just obviously there's a casting choice with Mahershala Ali playing Sheikh Ali, but the idea of the Sheikh that would be, I think, in this show most emblematic of someone who's been transformed by the faith and doing it in a really beautiful way, is, to be a Black Sufi Sheikh was just so exciting to us, especially with historically the presence that Black Muslims have had in this country, right? The longest lineage of Muslims historically here are Black Muslims. And so to have him be and Zainab be, I think, really great examples of what this faith looks like, worn in a way that has ease and that has a lot of strength, and was really exciting for us. And Amir can speak more to kind of, what we really wanted to do with those characters.
Yeah, that was one of one of the things about working on this show and meeting Rami, in the context of the season. And I was happy that he was very deliberately wanting to take the step into this arena, because not only obviously because it's the world that I grew up in, that's a big part, but it's just such a fascinating world, even just as a storyteller. The Black Muslim experience is such a peculiar experience, even in the Muslim world, that we understand that many of the enslaved people from Africa had the Muslim faith, and the faith was outlawed, and reciting Quran was outlawed, and calling the Adhan was outlawed, and praying was outlawed. And so there was a very deliberate stripping of the faith from Black people. And there was a very deliberate stripping of the faith from Black people. And then, you know, however many generations later, they return in mass, you know, to the faith without a very explicit da'i, without a very specific missionary movement in America. And even like when we find in the Black American community that's not Muslim, that we come across names like Aisha is like a Black girl's name, you know what I mean? Or Malik is like a Black boy's name, Jamal and Kamal, and, you know, and that there's something like genetically, intuitively, that's, that remembers, you know, Islam. And so in creating this character for this season, I was very interested, and I had some, and it felt like a big responsibility, because this is going to, I don't remember ever, May would even know this better than me, but if we've ever had a Black Sufi character really on television, or a sheikh, you know, and especially with the sheikhness, and, you know, in the modern world and in our worlds that we're living in, particularly like in entertainment, Hollywood and all of that, the spiritual guide is kind of just that concept. Sometimes it can be kind of controversial, or there's like what Ramy was saying, where, you know, the when you do bring those types of figures up, you have to at the same time like debunk them. You know, there's this move towards like exposing the ugly underbelly of, but we're like, what if we make someone who's essentially actually good and been actually transformed by the faith, as Ramy was saying. And I think, and I remember Adel mentioning this on another occasion about how Mahershala's character is like a moral, I forget what word you use, but like a moral placeholder in the season to contrast Rami's Raminess, you know what I mean? And so creating as this kind of strong Black male Muslim character was something that was very familiar to me. And it was I loved bringing that out for other people to see, because I know many people have never even heard or seen, or never, like when I would go out at Hajj, perform my Hajj, people say, you know, where are you from? I'm from America. But no, like, really, really, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from America. They say, you're Muslim. I'm at Hajj. I'm in Ihram. I'm in Hajj. So, but that shows the type of, the lack of visibility that even in the imagination, even other places in the Muslim world, the idea of how common Black Islam is, they don't know. So it was a wonderful honor and experience, and something I'm very grateful for, to have any contribution to bringing that character to the screen.
Can I say something to that, which is really interesting? I've been doing a lot of Black Arab solidarity work, Afro-Arab solidarity work, and what you were just talking about, Amir, I found out from people who live in the region that because they only get, I don't want to say propaganda, but they get Hollywood images around Black Americans, it's hard for them to, one, understand them as Muslim, and then two, know the history. When they're asking Amir, you know, where you're from, they think he knows his lineage of what country his family is from, either who in the African diaspora. So they don't know the full capacity of slavery and what it did to folks. And I think in that scene that you're talking about, Rowaida, there might be just a little bit of lines, but each line has an intentional, really deep backstory in our community. So bringing up the corner stores, like in this moment, this is such like the magnitude of this conversation cannot be overstated. And even doing this work for over a decade, and I've, as a journalist, interviewed Arab liquor store owners trying to figure out why they go into that business. and how they understand race and the fact that they are predominantly in Black working class neighborhoods and what that means and what that does. And, you know, it's not until this moment people have been doing the work, but not until this moment they've been having these conversations because of the murder of George Floyd coming at the hands of actually calling the cops after months of us watching clear examples of what happens when you call the cops on Black people. That we know the track record. Why would you call a cop on a $20 counterfeit bill? And how are you contributing in life-affirming ways to a community? So that one line is speaking the tension of decades between the communities. And so I think it was a beautiful premonition, but I know that we also knew we could not bring characters into the home of folks and not tell the truth of what happens. You know, there are folks that are associated with the show who are Arab and have had that same exact conversation because their siblings have married into Black families. And so this is a microcosm for so many more of these conversations that have been happening. And I'm really proud that we could do that work. And some people might see it as airing out dirty laundry. I know when I went on Twitter and critiqued Arab-owned liquor stores, I was called Munafika. I was called a fake Muslim for critiquing liquor stores owned by Muslims. Like there's so much educational work we need to do. And if our popular culture is trying to do that work, we have more space to play with. And they might be a little triggered and mad for a short period of time, but then the education comes in. And this moment was perfectly timed because there's a massive public education campaign that's been happening around anti-Black racism and anti-Blackness now.
And you know, for the record, Kate's been called a fake Muslim too many times. Kate, I mean, I think we've had to defend you constantly, you know, and just
thank you
so that everybody knows.
Because I'm the real victim here.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about diversity, it is more than checking off these boxes and these labels, right? And I think that's what's being challenged now. Throwing on a Black character or throwing on like more women characters is not going to fulfill or enrich those conversations at all. And I think one of the biggest progressions that I saw from season 1 and season 2 is really all the secondary characters almost had a life on their own. Like I kind of wanted to watch a spin-off on the secondary characters because of how well thought they were and how so developed they were. I think so much more from the second season. And I think that to me really focuses and really touches on this issue of diversity. And again, it's not just the racial component. Yes, that's very incredible, but you know, the fact that it was a Sufi scent, I think we're talking about like theological diversity, we're talking about the gender diversity, we're talking about a lot of these uncomfortable issues that people don't want to talk about, like homophobia, like transphobia, that was all addressed in the show. So I think when we're talking about trying to do something holistically, it's challenging when you're covering a faith group, because that faith group falls into so many other intersections, right? Whether it's issues that are important to them, whether it's race, whether it's religion, all of that stuff. And so talk to me about, I think, some of the changes, like what did you walk out from season 1 that you were like, this is on our short list, this is what we want to champion? And I think diversity was definitely one of those, because I think we saw that really up and center in season 2. Were there other things that you guys were just like super stoked that you got to flesh out a little bit more in the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's less changes, it's more just what's it organically going to grow into, right? I mean, I think like the growth that we step into, you can't do unless you do season 1 the way that you do, right? I actually have no regrets about season 1. I think we did everything that we were able to do that we wanted to do. And I feel the same way about season 2. And it always leaves room for, oh, well, we're going to get to expand into more things. So I think consciously, really what it is, it's, yeah, we've met these people. We're really excited about them. We just found them. You know, I mean, we made a show based on probably, you know, 10 years-ish of comedy that I've been doing in various forms. And so it's a show called Rami. And we had a really good time introducing the other people around him. And then season 2, yeah, we know who they are now and we get to really dig into them. And so I think for me, it was just looking at season 1 and looking at what made me excited, you know, looking at, wow, I'm really excited by the mom. Wow, I'm really excited by the sister. Wow, these breadcrumbs that we've left behind with the uncle, they can grow into this, you know? I think it was really just exciting for us to, I think, put more plot on the series. I think that was the thing where it was like season 1, we're kind of following Rami going through life in a certain way, where he's asking a lot of questions, and it's very like aspirational. And I think season 2, we wanted it to be transformational, where we were like, okay, he was asking who am I, and now here's who he actually is. So I think the main takeaway for me was we basically did this self-discovery, semi-navel gazing thing as well as we could. Like, I think, like, really in the most exciting way. And then now it's like, how do we put a little more plot, a little more shades of that on him? And I think that's what everyone here really helped build out. And I think, you know, we have such a cool room because everyone kind of comes at it from a different way. I mean, obviously, like, even on this chat right now, it's like Amir has his perspective, Maytha, Adel. I mean, I think even like Kate is funny because like we talk about, like, to me, actually, my neighbor growing up was Greek, and so like when we talk about you being Greek, and then it's just like, oh yeah, like my neighbor Angie was like, we both had the same problems, the same thing. We watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding like it was a Muslim story, you know, like that was like, oh, that's us. Like we have our, just like, it's so specific that you can algebraically like just replace this and this, and there's still Windex and like whatever it is. Like we would watch that stuff and be like, oh, this feels like really connected. But then also, like, you know, I think Kate's interest in some of those secondary characters that you were talking about too. Like we wrote the Nassim episode together, which Kate can speak to, but also I think Kate has like a very unhealthy obsession with Steve and figuring out stuff for him, and kind of looking at the disabled community in an interesting way. I don't, sorry to air that out for you, but.
No, it's okay. It needed to come out, and it was gonna be later. So. Yeah,
tell us a little bit of some of like your favorite parts. What excited you the most throughout this whole process?
What excited me?
Yeah.
You. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear who was being asked. Okay. Oh, I mean, I was so excited to just. I mean, when I watched the first season, I was like, oh my god, this is so good. It's so good, and like the way, just from working in TV and the other just like development work that I've done on my own stuff, and then I think like it was the like 5th room that I'd been in, and just from all of that, all of the lessons, and just even consuming TV about just like when it slips into this, and I think it slips into being didactic, and what was so exciting to me watching season 1 is that it never did that, and I was just like, oh god, this is what art should be, is when you really go for it, because the more you go for it, the more nuanced and honest and interesting it all is. So then knowing that was going to be the type of show I was going to work on was like, I'm so in. And then I just learned so much from everybody, and it was just like such a joyful group to be around, and it was very like everyone was so open about like everything, and it's just in just discussions and just like coming to each other as like fully rendered people. It was, yeah, it was such, I was so excited, and it exceeded all of my expectations for how it would be. This is the best.
Then, and the Steve obsession.
Oh, and the Steve obsession. Well, the thing is, I mean, truly, I am obsessed with Steve because I think he's so funny, and he's so fucking funny, and like, yeah, just like the way that he like his perspective, and just like knowing that like that he and Rami were actually childhood friends, and just the way that they both kind of like really go for it when they're talking to each other, that was just like another aspect that was so rich. And and Rami mentioned this in Entertainment Weekly, that one of my favorite parts of the season was when Rami had to jerk Steve off, and that was like it was so something about just the two characters and like part of their friendship in such a thorny situation among so many other thorny situations of different spheres. And it was just, yeah, it was exciting to see what we could do with everybody, including Steve.
I love that you mentioned that was your favorite part of the scene. And so now it just has me thinking, like, what is everybody else's, without giving too much away, like their favorite part of this season? Is there like a particular moment that was like really super relatable, or something that just like really made you laugh? And I'm going to put you on the spotlight and make you go first.
I mean, for me, I've always just loved the final scene between the Sheikh and Rami. I think that's really what needed to happen to that character more than anything else that's ever happened to him. And just seeing the way that Rami kind of cowers in the face of that truth. Yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes like ever of anything. I think it's really well done, well acted. It's a great scene.
Maytha, what about you?
God, I have so many spinning. Just being on set that day for that scene was one of my greatest gifts of life. Just to see the improv that emerged, and also we created that character that had elements of being morally pristine, but showing that he could break down and who could break him down. It was that culmination. I know the amount of F-bombs were perfect. Absolutely perfect. I also loved all the stuff that was happening in the episode that I was a part of writing with Dina. I mean, the amount of Arab women that have come up to me and said, I was afraid of Hasad my whole life because my mom instilled this in me, and she told me that I had to pray it out and not post things on Facebook. That meant so much to hear people find the resonances. And then the last thing I'll say, because I think now I'm seeing the reactions to this Emirati royal character. I've been around those folks. This is not too far-fetched what we were talking about. We actually wanted to have real big cats there, but it was some ethical issues, but they actually have that stuff. So every part of that Rami Archer moment, those series of moments were so on point.
What about you, Amir?
I think I think also the final scene between the Sheikh and Rami would have to be, and also remembering just on set and we had talked so much about how to give the Sheikh dimension, although he's kind of the moral tentpole of the season, well, him and Zainab, but how to give him dimension and make him interesting. And so we knew at the end there was going to have to be some sort of breaking of that pristineness, but we didn't want it to look like a mask. Like it wasn't like an exposing, like oh, he was pretending before and now this is the real him. We were very careful about doing that because we wanted to say, no, all of that is true and this is true, and how to do that effectively. And it's just a scene that I'm so happy that we got right. It was a scene that I thought a lot about, that concerned me a lot of how to do that. And so I couldn't be happier with it. I really like that. I really like that scene. I think that's my favorite. Yeah.
What about you, Rami?
I think my favorite scene that we did this season is the Bayah in episode 1 of the second season, where it's kind of why I wanted to make the show. It's this idea that, and only Mahershala could pull it off, as Sheikh Hadi, because it's this idea that, Rami is kind of burying his life in front of this Sheikh, and he's kind of telling him just how horrible he feels about himself as a person, and really the guilt and the regret. And I think these questions we all kind of carry about ourselves in so many forms of why did I do what I did? Can I ever really change? And then you have someone who I would say any person of faith in general, but someone who's a Muslim in this case, who listens to him and says, okay, like I accept you. Like, are you ready to change? You know, just this idea that there's so much love in that interaction where it's like, I'm not judging you. I'm not judging anything that you said. The only thing I'm looking at is your willingness to change. Are you willing to be open from here on? You know, are you willing to really take this on? And so that being expressed and that being genuine on the side of the sheikh, it's just so exciting to me. I just have always wanted people to see like how loving the faith is, and so to be able to do that and to be able to see that is probably my favorite moment, my favorite part, and it was also just this great intro into this amazing character for Sheikh Hadi. Yeah, I really like that moment a lot. I mean, Rami messes up everything after that, but I really like that moment.
Yeah, because I think for that brief moment, and I think a lot of us do this, not just Muslims, but I think people of faith, oftentimes religion can feel like a series of like tallies or just like checks and boxes, like, okay, 5 Rami points today, but 6 bad things today, and those cancel those out. And so I'm sleeping with I'm in the negatives. I'm like, let's just try again tomorrow. And I think that moment really broke this, I think really like this numerical, this very strict dichotomy of like good deed, bad deed, right? And makes this idea of like a good person or a bad person, because at times you feel bad for Rami, and at times you're just like, dude, like what the hell are you doing? Like no one would go down that route. And so I thought that was a particularly insightful takeaway for myself. Were there other big takeaways for you guys, I think, coming out of this, or maybe something that you learned personally that you didn't know before?
I think one thing that's really cool is that, when the product comes out, it is kind of philanthropic, and that it does serve a lot of people. It starts a lot of conversations with other people and communities. But what I really took from this was the process being a real personal improvement process, like spending time with Rami and Amir and Maytha and Kate and Azhar and, everyone else in the room. We all kind of have this like general, if we had a Venn diagram of all our interests, there's like a big section that's in the middle. And so to kind of explore those things that we all kind of are passionate about and kind of pushing each other to explore those things, that's a lot of fun. I really hope that, anything that I ever do again in my life will be that same way, that all parties are involved in kind of, exploring the same thing and fulfilling the same vision. And so, working on this show, it's a dream. And the amount of ways in which I feel like I've improved, not just as a writer, but like as a person, just spending time in the company that I spent time in throughout the process. It's truly incredible.
Yeah.
I love that. Any other big takeaways?
Yeah. As I was listening to Rami talk about the transformation of the Rami character and also people's responses, the other characters' responses to him, kind of reminded that our show kind of does 2 things at the same time, which is the larger media landscape has focused on Muslims as an identity, but we're really interested in what it means to practice Islam, right? And so I think the hyper focus on Muslim identity becomes so much more about performance piety. And then I think that's why there's a lot of pushback, because people are still doing the tally marks, as you were saying, Rowaida. But when you look at it from the viewpoint of what does it look like to follow a journey of somebody who practices Islam, right? Kind of separating the perfect wholeness of the faith and somebody trying to negotiate that with their ego, with their context and their relationships is really interesting. So, when Rami was talking, I was thinking about how we say our Allah, the divine, says, my mercy comes before my wrath. And so throughout this whole season, we're watching how much mercy Sheikh Ali has for Rami. But we also know that wrath exists, and wrath is a form of accountability. And so Rami gets his ass handed to him in that moment. And that's all part of the moral and spiritual universe that we're living in. And I think for me, we had so many great, deep philosophical conversations about spirituality, not just Islam. And it was such a emotional moment for me to hear folks like Kate, like the non-Muslims in the room, talk about bay'ah and use that language and say, is this a moment when somebody can take away your bay'ah? Like, what does that look like? And I feel like I grew from learning about this whole process as well. I mean, Ramy trusted me to bring me in as a creative advisor, then a writer with not really a track record writing comedy. And I've started to learn what it means to look at character development through relationships and think about it as a collaborative process. So I'm really grateful for everybody that's here and the rest of the writers' room that is not present with us, because like I told Ramy, it feels like I was getting paid to take a master class. Oh, well.
I felt that too.
Yeah. For me, dealing specifically with the Sheikh Ali character. So, you know, when this character was first brought forward, like, you know, we want to create this, you know, Black Sufi Sheikh, I'm thinking myself as a person in a tariqah, a person who has a sheikh, a person who's, you know, doing that, living that life and having that experience. You know, so naturally what came to my mind is my own sheikh. So like, you know, what would my sheikh do? And I'm kind of crafting this character around my own sheikh. But it was difficult because I learned through this process that I kind of don't have a space for my sheikh to be human, you know what I mean? And which is very hard to create character that's interesting without having that. And so one of the ways that helped me to put it in perspective, it was more like, what if my sheikh told me I had to open his awiyah? So it's like, Amir, I'm charging you with this thing, you have to open his awiyah. And I'm thinking about the fear, the uncertainty, the type of moral dilemmas that would come up. I have a daughter that's very much like Zainab in that part of her life. And, you know, so I have daughters that are around marrying age and starting to have, and I was literally starting to have those conversations while we were on set. You know, I remember standing next to Adel and I'm like, my daughter just texted me about this guy that she wants me to meet because she thinks she wants to marry this guy, you know what I mean? And so obviously, you know, Ramy, this season is not necessarily an aspirational tale and not lame, but it was, it helped me in the way that it put me in the space of these more dilemmas. And so when Sheikh Ali is dealing with him and dealing with his daughters, the type of decisions that he has to make about how he's going to do this and how much sheikh to be and how much father to be and how much man to be and how much humility to have and how much authority to have, and, you know, just what is the best way of engaging each situation and how challenging that is for a human being to do when people are putting their heart in your hands. You know, it's not like being a banker or even being a doctor where someone is putting their body in your hands or someone is putting their wealth in your hands. Like someone is putting their heart and their relationship with God in your hands and asking for your help. And what a great deal of stress and anxiety must come with that. So thinking about that helped me in my own relationship with my own sheikh and helped me look at myself differently as a murid, as a disciple, or what do they call those people in English?
Yeah, disciple.
Like I don't speak English. Yeah. Like, how do you say? Well, yeah, like a disciple. You know, a student. You know, how to be a student and how to make space. You know, for my teachers to have humanness. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was a big takeaway for me.
I love that. And that kind of on that thought, has there been any particular scenes that you've gone home to immediate friends and family that you had to talk about or you guys can relate to? I love that Amir was going through this parallel of his own daughter and still writing this character. So what's the conversations been like at home with you guys, with the people in your immediate circle?
I know for me with the Evil Eye, you know, episode, a lot of ideas came from, just talking to my mom. I know Rami did the same thing, talking to his parents. And, when you're an Egyptian in America or not in America, there's a lot of that evil eye thing, circulating around. In my household at the time, actually, like my sister was getting reamed for posting her graduation picture 2 months before her graduation. And she ended up not having her graduation because of Corona. So in my household, Corona is because of the evil eye. It's because my sister posted that graduation. So that kind of stuff it's a lot of fun to kind of play around with that stuff at home too.
And I think what's so great and what's so beautiful about that is just that you are able to operate with this like concept of understanding. I think it's in regards to the audience reception, right? So like the title of the episode was called Maya. Like we are saying the concept of hasad, right? And I think oftentimes we see like a watered down version in a lot of like writings or Islam or even just like in text where people are just like, well, the hijab, the headscarf that Muslim women wear, and then you feel like you can't go into the nuances because you have to explain the basics. And so I feel like what was just so great about the hasad line and all of the other things, that there's no need to like dilute some of these religious or cultural incidents, because you expect your reader to know. And if they don't, if the onus is kind of on them, and not that they don't understand it as this is developing, but I think to have that level of like that common intellectual understanding, I think must have been challenging to capture creatively.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the audience is really smart. There's so much television. We're watching so many things. Everyone gets the language of TV and how things go, and you don't need to hit it on like it's just for us, just trusting that the audience is smart, and if they don't get something, they'll look it up. Like it's not that hard. I mean, we're dealing in an information age where actually I think people are more excited by information that they don't know, and so it's not about obscuring it or anything, but it's just really about, we don't feel the need to spell this stuff out really. It's for who it's for, and very much, in terms of target audience, on one hand it's everybody, but then I think, speaking to Adel's comment earlier about how much we love within our own communities the conversations that this brings up, we're gearing this towards someone who already baseline knows what's going on, therefore our communities, and so I think people who aren't part of them are, again, excited by it in the same way that I watch things that aren't my culture exactly, but I still relate because it's so in that pocket.
Yeah. So one thing that I'd love to kind of dive into a little bit is the process of being in a writer's room. So what are these brainstorming sessions like? I think people love the behind the scenes stuff, so I want to talk about it a little bit. I know I have had my fair share of, when I think about story ideas or a person I need to talk to middle of the night, I am rolling out of bed and I'm trying to grab my phone and I'm writing it down in my notes. So do you guys do that in the middle of the night? Is there something similar? Do you turn off all social media like the dramatic writers on TV do and go off on a faraway land and hunker down for a week and a half? Talk to me about this a little bit.
We all rely on Kate's handwriting. That's what we did.
Kate's handwriting is very key. She's probably the only person who's allowed to write on the board in the room. We wrote this show, both seasons, different houses, but we had a house kind of nicer than office space for us in the way that we work. We're just in a living room with a kitchen, and we had a backyard that had a table out there too, and sometimes we'd hang out there. I have shadowed some writers' rooms, but I've never been in one formally. But the way we really do this room, especially in the second season, is like, we're not trying to overdo anything. I think we're trying to have inspired conversations. And so I think a lot of it would start with me bringing, whether it be a stand-up joke or a desire or what I would call like an umbrella topic on an episode. It was always really making sure like we're furthering plot while also really looking at something that needed to be discussed. We never wanted anything to just be the issue. We never wanted anything to just be plot. And so I think for us, it was talking a lot about what excites us, what are our goals, and so I would try to really just bring forth my goals for each episode, and then we'd we'd talk through it. And in terms of, yeah, it's just whenever there's an inspired conversation, we'd have it. And then whenever there wasn't, it would be like, all right, let's just kind of end for the day. And like, everyone can think about it. And like, I'd rather end at 1 p.m. and then have a productive phone call 3 hours later. If somebody thinks of something, call me, as opposed to just all of us kind of like sitting in a room, like, you know, looking at each other and kind of feeling like, well, this is work, you know, we got to be here, you know. So we were, I think, in that sense, felt like people hanging out and being productive at the same time.
Yeah, having like I'd never worked out of an Airbnb before, and it was like, oh, this is better. It was, I mean, it was also like just the personalities of everybody and just being able to, like, I mean, and this is like a testament to Rami for like putting together a really good room of people that all like vibed together and just and loved the show and like loved each other. And then to be in that kind of space, it was like so conducive to just being creative. And then like as you just said, it's just the knowing like our flow as a room and as people, it was more helpful to like do it. We just followed the way we were feeling. Some days it was like we were vibing and it would just go for hours, and then other days it was like, let's not bang our heads against the wall for a couple hours and let's just like think on it and let it process. And just having the freedom to not feel like, oh, we got to do it all now, but because we just trusted each other in the process and the show. And like Rami having a very clear vision, and I've worked on shows where people do not, and it is a nightmare. It's impossible to make anything good if the creator doesn't have a very strong vision. So all of those elements together were very conducive to just in the room figuring stuff out and then living with it once we were done and figuring stuff out afterwards.
I think that's something that was really helpful to, you know, us being a season 2 writers room, was that, you know, all the legwork done in season 1, really the characters were established. They kind of wrote themselves, you know? And so to your earlier point, Rowaida, about, you know, the secondary characters being really fleshed out as well, we had time to do that because of how much, you know, we knew these characters just from the season 1, you know, arcs and you know, stories that we told there. So, you know, we had so much time for discussion, and we explored so many different things, and it's just the structure of it was a dream. Yeah, those houses, I mean, they're amazing. People could sleep there, people could just hang. It was fantastic.
There did feel like there was a little bit of a haunted room up there, but we didn't spend much time there. But we did create a really beautiful, dynamic, organic space for conversation. It's my first room, but as I understand it, sometimes there's or feels like a built-in hierarchy. I didn't feel that about the room. It felt like anarchy in the best way, that we could share from our experiences. And I know that this is the value of having people from those experiences who might not have the strict training around writing TV or screenwriting, but we'd come in and say, what would Maytha say about the epitome of beauty, right? And so we had this debate, is it Julia Roberts or is it somebody else? And then Rami could call his mom and Adel could check in with his mom and I checked in with my mom. And then we got her on speakerphone and we went through like Arab standards of beauty.
And it was unanimously Julia Roberts.
Roberts, yeah, because Pretty Woman was such a fun, dimensional love story. For whatever reason, sex worker meets businessman is like the ideal story in the Middle East. So ideal rom-com. But we could have those moments, and you know, the collaborative process, like everybody's been saying, felt like it was moving story. When it wasn't, then as Rami said, we would end. There was a lot of Topo Chico, which was helpful too. It was. And like I said, I think there was just some natural mentorship that ended up happening in the room, whether or not it was the expertise some of us brought from the faith tradition, or whether it was the folks that came in from long decades or years in TV writing. So yeah, it was an amazingly creative, fun process. And having come from academia and journalism, I was astounded by how fun it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and like for myself as a poet, writing poetry is extremely insular. It's extremely solitary. And writing for television, this specific room, this is the only room I've been in, so I can't compare it to other rooms, but it was so interactive from the very first moment. As a poet, you may write a thing and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and then maybe an editor may see it before it goes out into the world, maybe, but it's like you go into yourself, you create an idea, you flesh it out, and you put it out. And so this, from the brainstorming part, the most tender and delicate part of the creative process, with all these folks in that part of the conversation, which as a poet, it was originally the idea of it was very uncomfortable, because it's like, I usually do this myself and then I'll present, and then we would, but in order for that to go well, all parties have to be very comfortable, to be that vulnerable, to bring up bad ideas that don't work, ideas that expose something about themselves. We're sharing all kinds of stories, life experiences and things. And so the environment, the safety of the environment, and the not just safety, but like the loving encouragement of the environment was really a profound and new experience. Although I've been writing in some capacity professionally for 20 years, this was like a brand new way of looking at writing. And so that was a profound addition to my understanding of what it is to write. Yeah.
And what was the relationship, I think, like between the writers and the characters? I think about Amr, who, as an Arab American, he does an incredible job of encapsulating, the immigrants who left home and that nostalgia, but wanting to assimilate. And I think of Stevie also, who is an incredible character on his own. And of course, in season 2, Mahershala, right? So how much of the writing gets changed on set? How much of the characters get to kind of fleshed into themselves? Are you guys seeing like a bit of a deviance? Is there more creativity during the production, or is it pretty close to the original, piece of drafts that you've written down?
It kind of depends on the episode. I think that a lot changes between the room and the set, I think, but also the changes are more just heightening what was already there so that we can reach the same essence. So I think the writers really agree on the essence of everything, and we get drafts of everything. And then as we're getting into production, things just become clear. You shoot a scene in the first week that kind of will affect something later, and then you're like, oh, actually, maybe we need to rewrite half of that other episode. Or actually, now that we've seen this on its feet, episode 7 is actually episode 4, whatever it might be. We definitely do a lot of it's constantly moving depending on how things are feeling and coming out. But we're also very much writing to the cast that we have. We're really lucky that we have a cast that really every role couldn't be played by anybody else. It's all really unique, and we're constantly tailoring to figure out how to enhance that even more.
Yeah, it seems like the actors really appreciate how much room they have to work with, in these scenes. I know Mahershala, the first time he came in, just asked such great questions and was able to kind of shape things in a way that he thought played to his strengths the best, and was also willing to make himself uncomfortable when he thought it was necessary. And I thought it was great watching all these actors kind of fall into place like that. Michael Chernus doesn't have a huge role on the show, but like every scene he's in, he kind of really makes it his own and really lives into it. But there's things that never were in a script, like that first episode where the old man takes the gun. Like, we never wrote that the old man takes the gun. Rami, just in rehearsal that day, was like, you know what, he should just take the gun. Like, that was a thing that we never, that was never in anyone's head, but Rami just had the idea, and we were able to just run with it, which was great. It helped the episode so much. So it's a lot of fun being on set like that.
Well, you know what was interesting? We did a whole remix on the Dina episode because the actor who was playing Dina, Maytha Alhassen, was going through an experience of hair loss. And so that informed the shift and change. And Rami and Adel had this great vision around bringing in Hasad because a lot of it is explained in that way. So we somehow pulled together that episode pretty quickly and added a lot of layers to it and depth. But I think we had the tow truck scene though from the original script. We knew that we wanted a spiritual confrontation or a confrontation around what Dina actually believed.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff like that was something that was really exciting, where you're going in to rewrite something because you're like, okay, I want this to feel more in the character, more in their body, and then we kind of organically have this conversation with May, and it becomes really clear, oh well, actually this actually really fits into what we're trying to get out with her, and so it's being able to be open to that stuff and not be like, but wait, what about the idea we thought about 4 months ago? Like there's no like that idea is not, it's not about that. It's about the moment that we're in and kind of being able to keep that alive. And I think that that's something that is very easy for me as a transition, just because in stand-up you're constantly just retweaking and it's all about just getting it right. It's not really about worshiping how it was written or anything like that. And I think even for Amir too, and just the way that poems hit him and just talking to him about his workflow and so a lot of that it's just there's a lot of harmony in how that comes together.
And also, like, I was not on production for Rami, but I have been before for things I've written on. But just being able to like see how the second season turned out felt like, and this is like the best version of that, is that when you go in and you're in a room and you're writing, there's an expectation that things are going to shift. And so just like the more that you kind of like respect that and like trust the people who are going to be on set, it just makes the jumping off point and like the like shit you throw against the wall just better, like knowing that that's going to happen and trusting the people that are going to enact it.
So have to ask, can we look forward to season 3?
What can we look forward, or can we look forward?
Can we look forward to a season 3?
I mean, look, we have not gotten the official pickup or anything, but I'm gonna make it. I mean, even if it's got to happen on my iPhone and it's just me ranting for 10 episodes, we'll have something. So there'll be something. We'll figure it out. Again, it'll be off my. Maybe I'll make a TikTok, but inshallah, we'll be able to.
Even if I have to replace Ursula, I'll make it on his iPhone.
I'll do it in a minute. We just that's how bad things are in America. Amir, people think that you are Mahershala. I mean, that's how bad this country got. Truly, like we're making the show. So I mean, hopefully we're making it with Hulu. I'm excited to do that.
I think a lot of people are excited. I think we're constantly still seeing people writing about it. They're really thoughtful pieces. We're seeing the conversations happening on Twitter and on TikTok. Also, TikTok is an amazing place. So I don't know why you're craving on TikTok. It's helping me get through COVID very well.
I'm saying oh my God, the amount of TikTok I've been watching is unbelievable.
Well, this has been super incredible. Thank you guys so much for all really taking the time. I mean, I think we can really go on for hours, but I think for all of our sanity, we'll probably pause here. I've learned so much. I hope you guys, it seems like you guys had a chance to see each other since, it's been a while. So that was also just like super sweet, and excited to see what comes, whether it's on an iPhone or whether it's through Hulu.
Thanks, Rowaida.
Thank you so much, Rowaida.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to say thanks again, and also thanks to this was in partnership with the WGA East, and thank you to Hulu, and thank you to everybody on our team too for organizing this, and thank you all for coming and joining in this today. And it was really great to be a part of. And honestly, everything you guys said too about production and everything just made me really nostalgic for getting back to when we can actually film things again. And I think that was really inspiring to be here. So thank you. And thanks for giving this talk. It's really helpful to be able to provide stuff like this to our community of filmmakers and kind of getting a little peek behind the scenes of this stuff. And it was really interesting, and I learned a lot from this talk and also just from the show. And I think that thank you guys for providing that amazing work. And yeah, and this will be a part of the Lower East Side Film Festival. It's our 10th year, happens to be virtual this year, but thank you guys for being a part of it. And the festival runs June 18th through the 29th, and this talk will be available the whole time on YouTube for anyone who wants to view it. So I really appreciate you guys being a part of this, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.